Jessica Carter was known around the office for being disciplined, kind, and focused. She wasn't the loudest person in the room, but when she spoke, people listened. At just 26, she was one of the youngest marketing analysts at Wellington & Company, a multinational firm in the heart of the city. Her life revolved around spreadsheets, deadlines, and the quiet dream of making something meaningful out of her career. Her boss, Mr. Alexander Wellison, was the opposite in every way. Charismatic, sharp, and feared, he was the company's millionaire CEO, a man whose presence alone could silence an entire boardroom. People respected him for his intelligence, but they whispered about his temper, his arrogance, and his obsession with control. To Jessica, he was just another powerful man who lived in a world completely different from hers. The story began on a humid Friday evening. Jessica was packing up her things after a long day when her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend, Lila. "Lila, girl, we're going to the beach tomorrow. You've worked too hard. It's time you breathe." Jessica smiled. She hadn't taken a break in months. Maybe a little sun and laughter were exactly what she needed. The next morning, she joined her friends on a weekend getaway to a private beach outside the city. For once, she let herself relax. She wore a new floral bikini, took photos, and laughed without care. She wasn't thinking about work, deadlines, or the intimidating eyes of Mr. Wellison. That night, as she sorted through the pictures, one stood out, bright, carefree, and full of sunlight. She wanted to send it to Lila, to thank her for dragging her out. But as fate would have it, Jessica made a mistake that would change her life forever. Half asleep, she clicked on the wrong contact. The name at the top of her screen didn't say Lila. It said Mr. Wellison. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late. The photo of her smiling at the ocean, wearing that bikini, had been sent. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. "Oh no," she whispered. Panic seized her. She tried to delete it, but the message had already been delivered. She spent the entire night wide awake, terrified. She imagined losing her job, being humiliated, or worse. When she arrived at work on Monday morning, every step toward her desk felt heavier than the last. At 9:07 a.m., her email pinged. It was from him. From Mr. Wellison. Subject: My office. Now. Jessica's palms went cold. She walked to the top floor, where the air was always colder, and the silence sharper. When she entered his office, he didn't look up right away. He just stared at his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. "Sit down," he said finally, his voice calm but unreadable. She obeyed. After a moment, he spoke. "I received a rather unexpected message from you this weekend." Jessica's throat tightened. "Sir, it was a mistake. I meant to send it to my friend. I'm so sorry. It wasn't meant for you." He studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Relax, Jessica. I'm not offended. Accidents happen." She exhaled shakily. "Thank you, sir. I really didn't mean to." He raised a hand to stop her. "I said it's fine. Go on with your day." She left, relieved but still uneasy. Something about his tone had felt wrong, too casual, too knowing. Days passed. Then the messages began. At first, they were subtle compliments about her work that sounded slightly too personal. Then they turned suggestive. He would call her into his office for unnecessary meetings, stand too close, speak in ways that made her uncomfortable. Jessica tried to ignore it, tried to keep things professional. But one evening, after everyone had gone home, she received another email from him. Subject: Let's talk privately. I think you owe me something for keeping that little photo between us. Her blood ran cold. She didn't reply. The next morning, he summoned her again. "Jessica," he said, leaning against his desk, "you're talented. I could see you promoted within months. But things can change if people think you've been unprofessional." Her voice shook. "Are you threatening me?" He smiled faintly. "I'm giving you a choice. Stay on my good side, and this little accident stays forgotten." Jessica walked out of his office trembling. She knew what he meant. He wanted silence, compliance, submission. She couldn't breathe. The man who held her future in his hands was blackmailing her with one innocent mistake. For the next few weeks, she lived in fear. She avoided eye contact, avoided the elevator he used, avoided everything. But gossip in offices travels faster than wind. A rumor began, whispers that Jessica had a special relationship with the CEO. Every hallway glance became a judgment. Every whispered laugh felt like a knife. She tried to confront him again. "Please, Mr. Wellison," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything wrong. You know it was an accident. Please stop this." He looked at her, coldly amused. "Accidents have consequences. Learn to live with them." That night, Jessica cried in her small apartment. She thought of quitting, of running away, but she knew that silence would make her the villain. The rumor would follow her. She'd lose everything she worked for. Then one evening, she made a decision. She opened her laptop, looked through every message, every email, every piece of proof she had of his manipulation. She saved everything. And then, she wrote one final message, not to him, but to the entire company. To everyone at Wellington and Company. I want to clarify something that has caused me months of pain. Several weeks ago, I mistakenly sent a personal photo to Mr. Wellison. It was never intended for him. Since that day, I have endured continuous harassment and threats from him. I've remained silent out of fear, but not anymore. She attached the screenshots, the emails, the proof. Then she clicked send to all. Within minutes, the office exploded into chaos. Phones rang non-stop. People whispered in disbelief. The company's internal network was flooded with replies of shock and support. Jessica turned off her computer and walked out. She felt light for the first time in months. The next day, the story hit the news. Millionaire CEO accused of blackmail and workplace harassment. Reporters crowded the building. The board launched an internal investigation. Mr. Wellison tried to deny it at first, calling it a fabrication, but the evidence was undeniable. The emails were traced back to his personal account. His reputation crumbled. Jessica was interviewed by the authorities, her hands trembling as she recounted everything. When asked why she finally spoke up, she said simply, because silence only protects the guilty. Within weeks, the board fired him. The police pressed charges for harassment and attempted blackmail. Shareholders withdrew support, and his empire began to collapse. Jessica, meanwhile, was placed on paid leave while the company tried to recover. At first, she was afraid people would still judge her. But instead, she received messages of solidarity from colleagues, strangers, even other women who had once been afraid to speak up. Months later, she returned to work, not as an analyst, but as the new head of corporate communications. The board recognized her courage and integrity. Her first project was a campaign about workplace respect and transparency. On her first day in the new office, she stood by the window, looking down at the city that had once terrified her. Lila called her phone, laughing. Lila, so, Miss Head of Communications, how does it feel to be the company hero? Jessica, exhausting, she said, smiling, but worth it. When the trial against Mr. Wellison finally concluded, he was found guilty. The image of him being escorted out of court was all over the news. Once powerful, now disgraced, Jessica watched quietly from her living room. There was no satisfaction in seeing him fall, only relief that truth had prevailed. In the months that followed, she rebuilt her confidence, her friendships, and her peace. She started mentoring younger women in the company, encouraging them never to let fear silence them. Sometimes, she still thought about that night, the mistake, the panic, the pain. But she had learned something powerful from it. Even the smallest error can lead to a battle worth fighting if it means standing up for yourself. Years later, when a new intern nervously approached her office and accidentally dropped coffee on her desk, Jessica only smiled and said, "Don't worry, mistakes happen. What matters is what you do next." And that was how her story ended, not as the girl who sent the wrong picture, but as the woman who refused to let anyone use it to control her. She was no longer afraid. She had turned humiliation into strength, silence into courage, and fear into freedom. The city outside her window sparkled in the evening light. Somewhere, a new story was beginning, but Jessica's chapter had finally found its peace.